Hello and welcome to Chinballs Gaming. I am Scop, and some time ago now, 6 months ago now apparently, I made this video on the Steam Deck, just how bad is Windows. And here I compared a few different games between both OSs. So back then, every game that I tested ran better in Windows, with the exception of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which ran basically the same in both OSs. This included Alien Isolation, Bioshock Infinite, Back 4 Blood, Lonely Mountains Downhill, and Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which ran basically the same in everything, which is great. So I finally got around to installing a few more games on my Steam Deck, and that included some games from other stores, in Epic and Ubisoft, and a lot of these games do have built-in benchmarks, so I decided to do some more benchmarking. So first up, Assassin's Creed Valhalla from Ubisoft Connect. This is running at the deck's native 1280 by 800 on the game's high quality preset. If you're not interested in watching all of this benchmark, then you can skip along to the end of it where I will summarize it. There will be some links in the description with timecodes if you prefer. So here are the results. SteamOS managed an average of 37 frames per second. Windows 11, on the other hand, only managed 32 frames a second. The 1% lows and 0.1% lows are also lower. And if you look just under the graph, it says frames rendered. So the SteamOS managed to render 2,963 frames, and Windows 11 managed to render 2,671 frames. So a win for SteamOS, even with a non-native build. Next up is GTA 5, and while this may be an older game, it is actually a very demanding game, or it can be if you push up the settings. Do note here that SteamOS would only render this game at 1280 by 720, whereas Windows 11 would render at the deck's native resolution of 1280 by 800. So potentially a slight advantage there for the SteamOS, but we'll just have to wait and see until the end of the benchmark, won't we? So yes, a slight difference in resolution there, but the results are telling me that both of these versions of the game ran at 56 frames a second on average. So now over to the Epic Store. This is Borderlands 3. It is running at the DeX native resolution of 1280 by 800 and the graphics preset is on medium. Do note that I'm running this on Windows in DirectX 11 mode. I will explain this later.
Don't get between me and my gun, heretic! Still gonna kill ya! Send some more fighters! Laying down some heat!
And so the results in SteamOS, this game ran at an average of 45 frames per second, and in Windows it ran at just under 40 frames per second. I also ran this game in DirectX 12, but the results were very all over the place. I only had one run that was actually any good. The rest of the runs were really janky. The frame times were all over the place, the frame rate was really bad, so I decided not to include that. But on a good day, apparently this game can run at 50 frames a second on Windows 11. So, Assassin's Creed Valhalla on SteamOS had an average frame rate of 37 with 1% and 0.1% lows of 21 and 18. Windows managed an average of 32 FPS with lows of 16 and 10. GTA 5 ran at 56 frames a second on average on both OSs. Windows was running slightly higher resolution, but I'm going to call that a draw, actually. Borderlands 3 ran at an average on SteamOS 45 frames a second, and Windows with DirectX 11 ran at 40 frames a second. So, 2 wins and a draw there for the SteamOS. So why do games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Borderlands 3 run better on the SteamOS? Well, I'm going to put that down to the available VRAM in all of these tests. You may have noticed on Windows, it could only use 4GB of VRAM. This is what I have set in the UWA buffer size in the BIOS. If you've left yours at default of 1GB, then you will probably see worse results. So if you are a Windows user, it is imperative that you change this setting in BIOS. SteamOS, on the other hand, can dynamically use up to 8GB of VRAM, regardless of what the UWA buffer is set to in BIOS. So if we look back, then Assassin's Creed used 5.9GB of VRAM and Windows used 4. GTA used 6.8GB of VRAM, again Windows used 4. And Borderlands 3 used 6GB of VRAM, and again Windows 4. Now, just because a game is using a lot of VRAM doesn't mean it actually needs it. Games are quite greedy with VRAM and will use as much as available. GTA, for instance, probably didn't need to use nearly 7GB of VRAM and would probably just run as well with 4GB if that was the maximum. The other 2 games, however, really do benefit from having more than 4GB of VRAM. Now, with regards to DirectX 12 on Borderlands 3 on Windows, DirectX 12 is known to be more VRAM heavy than DirectX 11, and this is probably why it was stuttering quite a lot, because it actually would probably need more than 4GB of VRAM. But whether you use SteamOS or Windows, quite honestly, I'm amazed that what is essentially a handheld, low-spec PC can run any of these games at all. I've spent a good while playing GTA 5 on the 360 and on the PS4, both old consoles now, but neither of them delivered a constant 30 FPS, often dropping into the low 20s in areas. The deck, on the other hand, with some tweaks to the settings, will no doubt be able to run this game at 60 FPS. or even 40 if you want to pull up the settings, but I'm not a fan of the 40 FPS mode. Maybe 48, maybe 50, I'm happy with. I'd rather game at a lower spec and try and get as much FPS as possible. It's not a case of one OS being better than the other. They both have their benefits and they both have their drawbacks. I use both, like you probably know if you've watched any of my other videos. I am dual booting, and one benefit of dual booting is that I have all my games on an NTFS SD card or SSD drive as well, and I am using the same game, the same install in both SteamOS and in Windows. So it's not taking up any more room than just having two OSs on. The games, it's the exact same game, the exact same code. Even in the stores, I've installed the stores on Windows, and then I've just gone into SteamOS, mounted my Windows hard drive, and used Proton to run the stores from the Windows partition. So, you know, I'm sharing a lot of data there. The only thing that's wasted data is Windows install itself, but I can then easily switch between the two, test a game out, see where it runs best or at all. Looking at you, SteamOS. But for the most part, if a game can run in SteamOS, I am going to just run it in SteamOS. It is probably the better place for it to run. It has a lot more available VRAM. I doubt the situation will change in Windows unless Valve update the drivers. I'm not sure how much that is possible on Windows or not. And going forward, I would say that's probably going to be more cases like this. More newer games that use a lot of VRAM are going to struggle on the Windows partition with only 4 GB of VRAM. So going forward, there are going to be more cases of SteamOS just being able to do a lot better in these games than not. But as you saw in my other video, which is showing now, most of your library would probably technically run better in Windows. But once you've got a 60 FPS cap on, like it's showing here, with some dialed in settings, everything's just going to run perfect in either OS. I'm ranting as I normally do right now, so I am going to say TTFN, tata for now, as Tigger would say.